Hey everyone, so we are going to be starting a new section in statistics called hypothesis testing. Now, a hypothesis, when you've been doing like science experiments and you had a hypothesis, you thought of this as one of your, like an educated guess. What we're going to think of hypothesis as is a claim. We're going to take a claim and we're going to test this claim based on sample evidence. Now, this is actually a pretty simple process, but it can sometimes get a little confusing. So I want to give you a very simple example based on a story from my teenage years. So I was out with my good buddies, Troy and Ron, and we were at a usual hangout spot, which would be Delton Lanes, doing some bowling. Okay? Now, this was pretty common for us to go to Delton Lanes when we were bored or just want something to do, but this time something really unusual and unforgettable happened. We were just about to begin a game when in walked Jessica Alba. Now, we were all pretty stunned by this, and what made it even more shocking was that she came to our lane and said, "Hey, do you mind if I join you for a game of bowling?" And we just kind of like stared at her in disbelief, and we're like, yeah, that would be awesome. Join us for a game of bowling. Okay? Now, she was like, "That's great. I haven't been able to get at bowling much, what with shooting films and everything, but I was in the area, saw this place, thought I'd come get a good bowl. So, how good are you guys at bowling?" Well, I actually spoke up first and said, "Yeah, to be honest, I'm not that great. I usually average about 100. She just said, "You know, I'll be honest. I find a man's bowling ability to be one of the most attractive things about it." Ouch for me, right? I just said I barely get 100, okay? So, I was claiming to be a 100 bowler, and then I heard that statement. Well, now, Troy and Ron, they still have a shot at this, right? So, Troy's like, I'm pretty good, to be honest. I average 200. And she said, "Really? That's pretty impressive." Well, not to be beat by that, Ron says, "I'm actually pretty good. I average 225. And she said, "Wow, that's really impressive." So she went over and sat by Ron. And I was like, "That's really cool. Tell me more about yourself." Well, anyway, that was kind of how it started. But then she said, "Now, I should also add, guys, a person's bowling ability is very attractive, but the most attractive thing to me is someone's honesty." Now, stakes are set, right? We've claimed to be 100, 200, and 225, but now we've got to live up to that, because if we don't get that, then it's going to look really bad for our honesty level. So we've got the game of our life here, and we go out there, try to get the best score possible. We've each made our initial claim. How do we live up to that? Well, I went and I actually had a pretty good game. I got 105. Boom. I broke 100, which in my book is a good game, right? Now, Troy, he claimed he'd be 200. He came in at 190. And Ron, poor Ron, he claimed he'd be at 225. He actually came in at 160. Now, if you remember, Jessica had told us that she wants someone to, like, she finds someone more attractive depending on their bowling score, but also on their honesty. Now, looking at me, I said I was 100, and I beat that. I got over it with 105. So, not a great bowler, but hey, I was honest, right? So that's going on. That's good for me. Let's look at Troy. He said he would get an average score of 200, and he got 190. Is that believable? Now, really, there's two things going on here. Either Troy is a 200 bowler, and he just bowled a little below average. The other thing would be that Troy is not a 200 bowler, and maybe he's lower, but he had bowled very well and got 190. The question is the 190 convincing evidence that he was lying? Is the fact that he bowled 190 unusual enough that we would doubt his claim? Well, I would still think that's pretty close. Okay, I'm going to think of this mathematically here. Okay, we're going to go back to probability. What's the probability that Troy would get a score of 200? So I'm gonna write this using some of the symbols we'll use. What's the probability that for a sample in one game he would get 190, assuming he really is a 200 bowler? So remember, this line is given. This is conditional probability. The probability that in one game he'd get 190, assuming he's a 200 bowler, it's still pretty likely. We're going to give him that. There's about a 60% chance. Okay. Would you give him the benefit of the doubt there? Yeah, because 60%, that's very common. So, good score, and also, we believe you. Now, let's go to Ron. He claimed he was a 225 bowler, and he got 160. Is that as believable? Let's write this out the way I wrote this one here. What's the probability that he would get a score as low as 160, assuming he is a 225 bowler on average? Again, there's two things going on here. Either he is a 225 bowler and he just had a really, really awful game, or his average is a lot lower than this, and this is more, and his score is more reflective of that. Now, if we were to do the math here, we're going to find that the probability of him getting a score this low, if he really is that good of a bowler, is about 2%. Not very good odds. We've talked before about what percent is what we would consider unusual. Kind of the baseline we usually say is about 5%. Anything less than 5% is considered unusual. And this is below 5%. So what does that tell us about Ron's claim? Means that he was lying. And Jessica saw this and was like, you know what? You, sir, are a dishonest man. I can't believe you would lie to me. And you, sir, you suck at bowling. So I'm not really interested. But you, sir, how'd you like to go get something to eat? And they actually got married. They have 3 kids now. He changed his name to whatever her husband's name is. And you can find it. It's all on the internet somewhere. Right? Okay. All right. The point is, we're going to be getting into hypothesis testing, which is testing a claim. Here are the claims. Here's the sample data. And we're going to look at the probability of getting the sample scores, assuming the claim is true. And that probability is called a p-value. We'll use that p-value to make a conclusion about whether we're going to say that that claim is false, or if we're going to say, well, we'll allow it. We're not saying it's true, but we're not going to reject his claim. All right. That was just a brief intro. Hopefully that makes sense, so that as you start to dive into the vocab and all the nitty-gritty of it, it'll make sense. All right, thanks, guys.